Hey everyone, welcome back. The workplace is experiencing its most dramatic transformation in decades as artificial intelligence reshapes every aspect of human resources, from job descriptions to candidate evaluation, performance management, and talent development. AI adoption among HR professionals has surged to 72% in 2025, up just from 58% in 2024, signaling a shift from experimentation to full scale implementation. Yet, with this rapid adoption comes critical questions. How do we maintain the human element while leveraging AI's efficiency? What does this mean for job seekers navigating AI screened applications? And how should leaders adapt their strategies? Today, I'm joined by Traci Austin, transformational leadership strategist and founder and chief talent officer at Elevated Talent Consulting, to explore AI's impact on HR, hiring, interviewing, and job applications. We'll discuss leadership and workforce trends, helping businesses stay ahead in this evolving landscape, examining both opportunities and challenges for talent acquisition and management. To support the show, click like on this video and visit chrishood.com/show to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on social media or email me directly at show@chrishood.com. I'm Chris Hood, and let's get connected.
Connecting. Access granted. It's the Chris Hood Show, where experts, creators, and change makers discuss how AI and technology are changing how we work, live, and connect. Unscripted, unfiltered, and unhyped. 5, 4, 3,
2, 1. Your digital evolution starts now. Here's your host, Chris Hood.
Traci, welcome to the show. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Traci Austin, and I support organizations with making things human, right? It's the relationships between people, and we focus on retention and really aligning folks' potential to what they're most excited about. That was a really shitty introduction, Chris. Can we start over?
Sure.
I'm sitting here going, I don't think I've ever screwed up an introduction before, but I feel like that one was not good.
Well, I'll tell you, it's not the worst introduction I've ever had. And I'll probably keep it whether you agree to it or not. I actually asked somebody to introduce themselves once before, and they said, "Yeah, hi, what's my name?" And they totally forgot their own name. And then once they got through their name, they're like, "I can't remember what I do." I said, "Deep breath." It's just deep breath. This is the joys of human. Let's go
we're
for
sitting here talking about AI, and I'm sitting here going, okay, AI, I clearly didn't clear my headspace before I stepped into our conversation, Chris, and clearly those waves were crossed, especially I'm like, well, what would AI say? I'm like, I don't think I'd like what AI would say about me.
It's actually, I think this is a flawless way to execute this conversation, because part of being human is our faults. Like, that is a natural conversation. I mean, if we were sitting here having coffee, you'd probably do the same thing. So
yeah. And the hilarious part is I've done hundreds of podcasts, and it's like, I don't think I've ever done that. I'm going, okay, well, let's go.
Well, if you like a do-over, if you would like a do-over with your background, go for it.
I think we've laughed enough to know, I don't know if you really need to know people's backgrounds. I think what's important is, what is it that you need, and can this person be able to provide something to you? Right now, we're providing a tremendous amount of humor, so we'll just go with that.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, one of the things that we do want to talk about, not just this human connection that we're all experiencing together, but when we look at companies today, and one of the areas that I think is really struggling with that human connection is in the hiring process. And there's multiple sides to this. There's obviously the applicant who is looking for work, and there's plenty of people out there looking for work. and the company who is trying to find employees, and they probably get 1,000 resumes for one job. How are you looking at this in today's day and age?
There's an and both to it. And what that is, one side of it is AI can be incredibly, incredibly helpful in processing things through. The other side of it is AI is not human, as we've just very well seen, right? And so, when we look at recruitment, there's, a couple things that I think is really important is what does that process look like on the employer standpoint and on the employee or the applicant standpoint. If you're putting everything into Chat GPT and just spitting it out, a lot of times, Chat GPT or Claude or whatever you're using, it won't tell you you're wrong. It's going to make you look bigger and better than what you actually are. And that for me brings forward some integrity things on an employer side. It's going, okay, do we actually know that what individuals are coming forward with is who they are? And so when we look at this AI piece, kind of my stance on this is connect personally when you're applying for positions. And, AI is a beautiful tool, but write it first and then put it into AI and say, can you, give me some tips or feedback on this to hit XYZ result that's still true based on what I have in the resume.
I'm going to go outside of the box with several things that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to start right here with this question. Do you feel as if we are getting close to a point in time where we no longer need resumes? Where it's simply, I'm interested in this role, and you have a conversation to determine if that person is eligible for the role. Like, as you just said, a lot of the resumes that are out there are, we'll just call it fabricated and buffed up a little bit. Theoretically, you're not getting much credibility out of a resume today. So why not just drop them all together and start with, let's have a conversation?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth to that, and one of the books I love it's called Who, and it's really about different ways of hiring. And what I love about this idea is we're hiring based on outcomes and we're having individuals describe what that is. Is the resume important? I have a yes or no on this. What's beautiful about a resume is we can see the depth and the breadth over a person's career. What we can't necessarily see on a resume is the outcomes that they have produced. And, that's where those conversations are really important. When we're working directly with clients specifically on hiring and having them create what is it that they want in a person, and I'll name, most organizations don't do a great job at this, right? It's like, okay, do you want a warm body, or what are the outcomes you want this person to collaborate and partner with you on to produce? And that is where the really great questions come into play. So we break this down into what I'm going to call the head, the heart, the briefcase. The head is really looking at behaviorally and cognitively, are they aligned to the role itself? So we use an assessment tool called Predictive Index. You can use a lot of them. Just make sure that they're legal for hiring. That's a different conversation. But then it's the culture piece. Are they aligned to the culture of the organization? And you can truly find that out through a conversation and some questions around behaviors to see if that's in alignment. Then, of course, we have the skill set piece. So do we still need a resume? I think it's still a useful tool, but I think it's pretty far down on the totem pole of priorities.
I'm going to come back to the alignment because one of these outside of the box thinking approaches that I have targets that. But, someone might argue that people who do have the experience, people who are aligned, people who have very strong skill sets that you're looking for, those resumes are never seen anyway. If I'm up against 1,000 people, I've experienced this myself. The number of responses I've gotten, we found somebody better aligned to the role. It's an automated message. And I know you haven't looked at my resume because I know what I'm capable of and I know what you're looking for. So how are we managing that, especially the expectation that, and quite frankly, I think a lot of depression that is happening because we've got people who are out there putting their best foot forward, attempting to make that good impression within their resume, but they're just not being seen.
Yeah. So I love how you just said putting their best foot forward. And I love a good definition, right? And so it's like, well, what does putting a best foot forward actually mean? Is it, applying through the robotic, hiring process? Or is it, I'm going to research the company, I'm going to connect on LinkedIn with, anyone that I have a mutual connection with, and I'm going to have a relationship with them, and I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to reach out to the recruiter for the organization and ask some questions, that are really important to me, that aligns my personal values with the organization's core values. Notice what we just did. We're focused on building a relationship that goes outside of the box of the thousands of resumes that are coming in that are all AI generated, into showing that you have things like persistence, showing that you have things like curiosity and a true interest in it versus just getting a job.
I totally agree. And I think what's interesting is you can agree with this statement or not, but it's been used throughout history, I think. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And part of the practice that you're outlining is going and networking and meeting people and using those relationships to help you get into the door. And then you've got to take over, but at least that helps you get through the door. And I think what's interesting is, especially now with artificial intelligence, is our desire to have these human connections and to network more are fading away, right? There are more and more people who are going introvert and they don't want to network, or that networking process has also become automated. The amount of spam that I get on a daily basis off of LinkedIn is astronomical.
Yeah,
and I know that none of them are actually real people who are trying to get to know me to build that network. And so there's a balancing act in here as well.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I'm going to tell a story. So my son is a freshman in college, and he wanted to get a job on campus as a lifeguard. Well, those on campus, when, there's, I don't know how many thousand students on campus, and, the rec center is literally across the street from the dorm, like, they're hard to get as a freshman, right? And, so he got his letter of recommendation. He sent everything in. He's been guarding since he was 16. Anyway, he's like, Mom, I'm not hearing back. I'm not hearing back. And I said, well, did you reach out? Yep, I sent an email. I said, okay, did you stop in the pool and ask to speak to the manager? He's like, yep, I did that. And I talked to a guard. Anyway, long story short, he texted me the other day and he's like, Mom, and it was a screenshot of the email, and it said, congratulations, your persistence got you the job. Can you come do your skills test?
I love that. I did lifeguarding when I was in college. So
yeah, so did I.
Kudos.
Yeah.
Yes. It's hard work. Yeah. Yeah. There is definitely, thinking about back on my career, like my very first job, which was working at a movie theater. I walked into the movie theater. I said, I love watching and going to the movies. Can I get a job here? I filled out an application, met with the manager, got hired on the spot. Now, that was a while ago, but the process of actually going in, filling out an application, talking with somebody, forcing that interview process is, in some ways there's some validity to that even today.
Yeah. And I'll give another story. I have a colleague who is at her organization for over 14 years, got laid off. There's a lot of layoffs happening right now, which means like there's a increased volume, which can be a beautiful thing, right? But it also means we need to think outside of the AI box. And so she reached out to me kind of going, Traci, I've not interviewed for positions. I've not even applied for positions. Like, that was a job almost right out of college. And, we kind of walked through and I said, what do you want? What are you passionate about? What kind of organization do you want? And I have something that is, a career goal setting workshop, and I'm happy to throw it in for you, Chris, into the show notes. But that is something that when you can get really clear on what you want and have clarity, you then become a magnet to you for what you want. So we went through this together and I said, okay, so what do you believe the next steps are? She's like, well, I'm just going to start applying to anything. And I said, okay, what are you applying for? And she listed out 5 different companies and whatnot. I said, okay. I said, who do you know at those companies? So we literally walked through She picked up the phone and got the numbers to actually call and talk to several folks within these different companies. I think she's on her third or fourth interview with some of them. Like she's had several within a 2-week period. And so she didn't go through the AI box. She did an and both.
Yeah, and I think the advice is very strong, and it actually can manifest pretty much in anything we want to talk about. For example, if you're a small business, if you're a startup and you're trying to build some new product, we often say start small. Narrow in exactly what you want to do, figure out who your market is, what is the problem you're trying to solve, go and solve that problem. We talk about this if you're a public speaker, like, or if you're an author, like figure out what the niche is, go focus on that niche, go, wrap a message around that, figure out what you really want to do. And yeah, I think the same applies for finding career paths. Like, what do you want to do? Not everything. What size of company, what type of role, do you want to lead people? Do you not want to lead people? What's your salary range? As you start to narrow that down, I think it's going to drastically help you really fine tune what your message is and how you reach out, how you network, what the language is in your resume. It also is going to help you during the interview processes because you don't have to remember like, okay, what was this job that I had applied for? And, what was the message for that role versus this role? Like a lot of it gets really clear when you can just narrow that down.
Yeah. And I think where AI becomes super, super helpful on both sides of this is when you know exactly what that is. I like to put in like the company profile along with here's my resume, here's what I want, here's all those things. These are the top 10 most important things to me in my career in the next year. I put all that data in and then I say, can you create some questions for me that I can ask to truly see if this is an organization that will be able to provide these things to me and that I will be able to meet what their specific needs are based on a strategic plan or whatever that is.
Let's return to the alignment because I think this is also another really interesting conversation. And I've had this conversation with some other people before, but I find that a lot of times, especially now, you have organizations that I think you kind of said it. I just need a warm body. There's a sense of desperation. I don't care who we hire. We just lost somebody. They've just left. They've given their 2 weeks, whatever it is. And I need somebody in that role right now. We can't go without. And so let's just go find somebody. And that desperation often causes this misalignment. And I think it applies to the other side too. When you are just applying to any and every job and you get in, let's just say you get the job, you get hired, and then 2 weeks, 3 weeks in, you're miserable because it's a job you don't want and you hate everything about it. I've never really known what a good balance is, but I do know what you've talked about, which is figuring out if there's a mutual alignment between both sides, making sure that there's a cultural fit is pretty critical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And, ensuring that those questions are asked up front, because it's much easier to negotiate before a contract is signed, right? Or before an employment agreement is there. But also knowing that, hey, if there's too many, concessions that are made, someone is going to end up frustrated later on as well. And that's where a lot of those questions really come in, and I have several organizations that we work with where a lot of times the conversation is around, a manager or a business owner saying, I really want them to work 60 hours a week. And my response is, they're not going to. They're not going to. They want to work 40 hours a week. So my question to you is, let's talk through what this is. If we let them, which they're going to anyway, work the 40 hours a week versus the 60 that you want them to work, what also are we going to let you do? I'm stealing a little bit here from Mel Robbins, or I'm borrowing. I'm not stealing because I named it, right? But like, what are we going to let us do then? And so that conversation goes into, well, our typical bonuses are 15%. And yet here's what we expect out of that in order to get a 15% bonus. I said, great. So if that is 60 hours a week or whatever it is, and they're working this, then how do we shift the outcome of what we give them so that it matches what the input of their work is. So, there's times where we have to rethink how we do things to get an and both. And that's really questioning, is the skill set that they have something that's really important? Is what they're providing when they're here, is that in 100% alignment? Well, yeah. I say, great. Then what's a different way of looking at this so that it's a win-win and we're not consistently fighting a battle that we don't have to?
Are you seeing that these expectations have changed recently? So, for example, employer expects 60 hours, but employee is thinking more like 30 hours. Like, are we seeing a big shift in those expectations and alignment?
I really see it generationally. I think that, our younger generations are really valuing work life a lot more. They're saying, I'm going to work really hard. And yet I want to balance. There's certain things that I don't necessarily want, nor am I going to, because there's a ton of opportunities out there, especially when we look at trade organizations. We work a lot with the trades, whether that is construction or, engineering or whatnot, but within that realm, electricians, plumbers, etc. And so there is a huge demand for folks coming in the trades because AI is not going to come, redo the plumbing inside of your house. It's not going to happen. We need a physical person in order to do that. And so with that being said, it is culture is a big piece of it within the organization, but then it's also, having the clarity of expectations up front and understanding what that person wants, because we have to have what I call a want match, right? What do I want? What do you want? Do we have a want match in between? And if it's not 100% there, where can we negotiate around that? And so often I feel like we've lost this art of negotiation with clear expectations.
Yeah, I think part of that art of negotiation is also back into that desperation. I just need a job. I'm willing to take whatever. Just give me something. And I agree that the beauty of the trade organizations is that it's pretty fairly protected right now against AI. But I do think that this perception, we'll say in the other side of business is that AI is going to be able to replace a lot of people, and that AI is going to be able to offset some of my headcount and my expenses, the ability to have to pay out benefits. No one's going to need time off, those types of things. And I haven't really done much research on this, but one area that I would be curious in is to try to figure out if people are instinctually, in some way gravitating towards the expectation that, well, wait a second, I know that I can bring on an AI thing that is going to be able to facilitate a lot of this work 24/7, no rest, and, beyond 60 hours a week. So why couldn't a human do it? Like, we obviously, if we're just talking about this logically, we know logically that the human can't perform in the same way. But I'm wondering, if there's kind of this push and pull where, those expectations are increasing because they can correlate it with, well, wait a second, then I'll just get an AI, to do it for me.
Yeah. I think that this is where we start to talk about the evolution of jobs, right? Like if we talk about, the industrial era or the different eras, the jobs changed and they changed significantly. And I do believe we're on another significant job shift. What we're actually doing. Are the jobs that are here today going to be the same jobs that are going to be here 20 years from now? In some areas, yes. In a lot of areas, I don't believe it is. I do believe there are a lot of things that AI can do better than we can do as humans, but that also does mean that you still need a human to make some of those decisions, right? I think about payroll, I think about accounting, I think about some of these key areas. Can AI do this better than a human can? In a lot of ways, yeah, it probably can. And some, you look at coding, you look at a lot of those things, yes. However, do we still need oversight into some of these areas? Absolutely. Like if we think about robotics in manufacturing, when we were, and this is still happening continuously, we're putting these robots in and we're automating a lot of the manufacturing line. We're automating a lot of these processes. Did it take us from 4 people to do a job down to 1 person to do a job? Yes, it did. And I think we're going to see the same thing here that happens with AI coming in a very different way.
I agree. The challenge for us is that the percentages, whatever we want to declare those percentages to be. So like you just said, if it takes 4 people to do a job and now 1 person can do the job, we can say, well, okay, let's just say that we need all these new jobs, whatever they might be. We need new jobs that are going to be a human in the loop to manage and watch over AI doing whatever they're optimizing. And even though it's more efficient, we've created a set of new jobs. But if it's only 1 person managing a set of actions, which really usually required 4 people to do, in addition to the planet is exponentially growing in population, right? And so we have this really hard thing in front of us where we are removing some jobs. Yes, we're increasing some new types of jobs, but we are decreasing jobs due to efficiency gains and increase in population, which means there's more people looking for work. At some point in time, I don't know if it's sustainable anymore. And I think, put aside like AI is going to replace people. What we're really looking at is that AI potentially has the potential to completely disrupt everything. And I don't really, and I've been studying this for a long time, I don't really see a clear path for how we resolve the disproportion of the amount of people that are looking for work versus the amount of roles, even if there's new roles that are going to come in and save us.
Yeah. And I think looking at that, there's a couple things. When we look at our labor market, it's actually, the number of folks available for work, it's not really growing, right? It's growing very, very little. And so with that being said, I think we're shifting, right? So we just talked about, okay, manufacturing shifting, but look where we're actually having an increase where we need to hire individuals, and that's trades organizations, that's your construction, that's those kind of things where it truly is that hands-on in types of environments that you really cannot have run by machines, at least at this point in time. So I do think that there's a shift, and I think the conversation that I love to have is, where are the jobs shifting to and where is the greatest need? And let's key into, how do we start attracting folks, and how do we create the training programs and the on-the-job mentoring programs in these kind of organizations? Because there are folks that are out there that are available. There's folks that have these behaviors that make them great because, they're craftspeople, they're artisans, they're really good at the detail orientation and the math pieces that trades organizations need for the laborer positions. And so I do think that it's really looking at and saying, okay, if we do some really strategic people strategy, what is needed in these organizations that we can start attracting the right people to the jobs of the future?
Yeah, I love the perspective on shifting, and I do agree with that. I think the other area that we haven't really explored would be any type of regulatory, types of laws that come into play. I had thrown this out a couple of days ago, which was, well, imagine a law that said, for any company, if you implement some sort of AI tool, you must hire at least 1 person, a 1-for-1 sort of correlation with that, which then enforces the human to machine maintaining those roles in some way. Again, I don't know if you could enforce that, but I think there might be some sort of compliance, regulatory adjustments, especially in some industries. Trade is one thing, but hospital systems as a great example. You probably would want 1 doctor for every 1 robot, in the operating room if we got to that point.
I think that there's a distinction between a compliance, and an impact thing here versus, the one by one. Like if we look at our current, political environment, I don't see that happening under this administration. There's a huge focus on AI, and what's happening with it because it has such a global impact. And there's a huge race right now for AI and what that looks like. Yet that also means, anytime there's uncertainty, there's a huge opportunity in another area if we're looking at it. So like, I do agree with you that it's incredibly important that we're looking at quality of the work that's being done, and I was at a HR conference a couple weeks ago, and one of the questions was really, when we look at AI, are we moving too fast with this, or have we made any mistakes so far? And what just about every single panelist said was, we've not moved with the AI, what are they called? The bots or whatever. My naming's not fantastic right now. I apologize. But we're doing questions and things, but we don't have, the specific kind of bots that are out there doing everything with it because we don't trust the data yet. And I think that there still is this training of AI that is incredibly important. And we do need to ensure that the data that's coming out of it is true. Like I said, I can put, some things into Chat GPT and it's going to give me the answer that I want versus the answer that is a lot of times true, because what does it want to do? It wants to please me, and it also wants me to keep coming back to it. So there's definitely some training pieces that we have to have in play here.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, I appreciate your time. It's been a fascinating conversation. Really, really great insights. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are on LinkedIn at Traci Austin. We also are at elevatedtalentconsulting.com, and you can find all of our information there.
Thanks again. I appreciate it. And for everyone who is watching, don't forget to like the video, share it with a friend, and we will see you again next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.